It's not often a game gets a second chance at making an impression. When Retro City Rampage finally released in 2012, the game was chock full of references and charm. At the same time, though, the duration was largely met with frustration, occasionally punctuated by enjoyable sections that would quickly give way to the controls or poor visibility. Fast forward a bit, and V-Blank revamped Retro City Rampage into Retro City Rampage Deluxe, promising a load of new features, fixes, and fun. Retro City Rampage Deluxe stars Player, an anti-hero for hire, who winds up in the year 20XX through time-traveling shenanigans. Player works with Doc Chock to rebuild parts to his time machine while overthrowing an evil corporation. The plot is a simple framework that's there just to hang up references and jokes. Some hit and some don't. Your mileage with Deluxe and its original will vary depending on how the humor sits with you. Many times it feels like a wonderful love letter to the 80s and 90s, but others, it's almost too thick to stomach, giving a nudge and a wink too many. Deluxe looks and sounds like an old school NES game, while obviously featuring a few too many colors and sprites. It does a passable job of translating a nostalgic past into a goofy rendition of old Grand Theft Auto style gameplay. Many of the landmarks, sounds, characters, and cameos do a good job of pairing decades-old pop culture and are instantly recognizable. The biggest issue, the small sprites, are thankfully rectified with the addition of a zoom feature that helps making stomping foes a little easier. The music within Retro City Rampage is comprised entirely of chiptunes from a variety of artists. Frankly, outside of the theme song, I didn't find any of the music particularly memorable. Music is, in more ways than one, a tricky thing to parody, so it's no surprise that there's no chiptune renditions of songs you'd hear on the radio. Sound effects, on the other hand, attempt to adhere to the bloops and bleeps of the NES, which, while not 100% accurate, is appreciated. Just from looking at it, Retro City Rampage Deluxe is clearly an attempt to create a retro-inspired Grand Theft Auto. The parallels between the two in gameplay are worn with a sense of pride almost on the game's sleeve. Like GTA, you have guns and weapons for attacking, but Player is also able to stomp enemies just like Mario. Stomping was the original game's biggest problem, as there are missions where that's your only means of attack. Thankfully, Deluxe has tweaked this, making the hitboxes much more forgiving and easier to hit. Stomping is pretty satisfying, and in a lot of cases, easier than using a gun. Shooting seems to have a mind of its own. There's an auto lock-on system that sometimes snaps to enemies you want, but often doesn't. For whatever reason, you'll find the cursor on enemies further away and less of a threat, with no way to adjust unless they're either killed or you stop shooting and try to orient yourself. Thankfully, you can freehand shots by using the right analog stick and treating the game as a twin-stick shooter. Deluxe has a cover system, but outside of the early missions in the game, and the few sneaking missions on display, there never felt like an advantage of using it over running, jumping, and gunning, especially in tight quarters. Hands down, the biggest improvement is the driving. Retro City Rampage's original driving was similar to the old Micro Machines games, which I love. Unfortunately, the chaos of the game didn't lend itself well to this driving style, but thankfully there's a much easier way to drive, simply tilting the stick in the direction you want to go. This may seem like a cop-out, but when you're trying to deal with the police and mob, and at the same time trying to aim your vehicle's guns from an overhead view, you get thankful for that easier control scheme. Zipping around the city is very fun, and the amount of different vehicles, each with their own different attributes and sometimes weapons or even missions, makes joyriding exciting. Deluxe's callbacks aren't always surface level. A lot of them do offer themselves to weapons or power-ups. You'll get speed shoes like Sonic or the old Zapper that flashes the screen like Duck Hunt throughout the adventure. While the weapons stick with you, the power-ups unfortunately don't. It's a shame because they're fun to use and their stay is often very limited and short. The city is packed with tons of hidden mini-games and secrets to find and collect. The sheer amount of unlockables, from weapons to customizable characters, is impressive. At the same time, the main game and set of missions is about the right length, taking about 6 to 8 hours. Missions typically involve driving from point A to point B to either pick something up or drive right back. To its credit, there is a decent amount of variety in Deluxe's mission structure. While some are just simply driving, others involve a Smash TV-esque game show where you're fighting waves of enemies. Some of this ambition is fully realized, especially with the improvements, but others fall flat. There's more than one instance where an enemy will have a grenade or explosive, but you won't know that until it explodes and player is killed. The chaos within Deluxe is both its strength and its weakness. It doesn't take much to wind up dead, and while checkpoints and missions are usually plentiful and there's no lives, it can suck to wind up punished, simply because you couldn't see something hidden behind a single small sprite. There's a lot to love in Retro City Rampage. The game is a love letter to the 80s and 90s pop culture, though it just might have been a bit too schmaltzy in its writing. The tweaks made to the core game shine through, and instead of a frustrating mess, Retro City Rampage Deluxe's mayhem is a delight. It's still rough around the edges despite the years of improvements heaped on, but if you're willing to deal with the occasional hiccup, Retro City Rampage Deluxe is worth the $15, especially on the Switch, which is arguably the best version of the game to date.